Well, this is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Haideakine, a dog returning home alone, alerts a Christchurch family to a brutal early morning stabbing. The police are live with the latest. The average dentist bill is a kick in the teeth at $350, unaffordable for half of us, according to a new report. Third-year nursing students want to be paid on hospital placements. The Health Minister is considering it. What would Dr Reti do? And dumping your junk roadside isn't recycling, it's just wishful thinking, according to Auckland Council, and it could cost you big time. You can check us out, Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Madiu, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Police say a dog walker attacked in the Christchurch suburb of Bexley was repeatedly stabbed. The man is in a critical condition in hospital as officers hunt for his attacker. Jean Edwards reports.
The badly injured man was found by his family, who went looking for him when his dog went home without him. They raised the alarm shortly after 6 o'clock this morning as he lay in Bexley Reserve at the Pages Road entrance. Police say it doesn't appear to have been a targeted attack. They say they're stepping up patrols and following a number of inquiries to work out exactly where the man was stabbed and the events leading up to it. They're encouraging people to be mindful of their surroundings. Police want to hear from anyone who saw anything suspicious in the area overnight, particularly from 4 o'clock this morning.
The families of two murdered young women have made tearful opening statements to the coroner's court in Christchurch today. 27-year-old Nicole Tuxford was raped and murdered by Paul Taunui in 2018, while he was on life parole for the rape and murder of 21-year-old Kimberly Schroeder in 1994. Ms Tuxford's mother, Cherie Gillette, had many questions she hopes the inquest will answer.
Why did corrections not listen to Kimberly's family? They knew this predator, what he was capable of. Why did corrections listen to what a convicted murderer said and preferred to believe him over Kimberly's family?
The inquest is set down for 2 weeks and will look specifically at Nicole Tuxford's murder and the sudden death of the first victim's father shortly afterwards. More Defence Force staff will head to Europe to assist with training Ukrainian forces, but the government is reducing the total number of boots on the ground. 66 personnel will head over at the end of the month, following a 120-person deployment in August. Defence Minister Peeni Henare says New Zealand is sending fewer people this time, as the work is now being shared by deployments from Australia and Canada. And with the Pacific cyclone season underway, more NZDF personnel are needed back here.
Our expectation is that the new lot of people that will be going over will be continuing to do the same amount of training over the extended period of time in the mandate. What we also have to balance here is the regeneration of our New Zealand Defence Force. It's well known the challenges that our New Zealand Defence Force have at this point in time.
As with previous deployments, at no point will the NZDF personnel enter Ukraine. An Auckland councillor says a second crossing over the Waitemata Harbour would be a massive asset for the city. Transport Minister Michael Wood yesterday announced the government will consult Aucklanders on what another crossing should look like. Richard Hills says it has to deliver for residents.
It feels like we've been talking about it for a very long time, and it's a priority for myself and our community. So we just want to get on with it, really. So it would be good to hear our community's views, but get them in quick, because I would really like to see something confirmed by the middle of next year.
Richard Hills says it doesn't matter if it's a bridge or a tunnel, as long as it gets done quickly. The government is looking at options for officially recognising the Black Ferns Rugby World Cup victory over England. An event is being organised at Parliament on their return, similar to events held for the men's team and for the Silver Ferns. But Sports Minister Grant Robertson says a public parade will be up to councils to organise and may be difficult.
That's to do with logistics and how we can, move people around and what that means for the particular time of year we're in. So I'm not saying no to that. What I'm saying is, from our perspective, we want to hold an event here to recognise the amazing achievements, and that's what we're working towards with the team.
Grant Robertson says bonuses for the Black Ferns and pay parity with male players are decisions for New Zealand rugby. And 4 northern royal albatross eggs are missing from the Taiaroa Head colony near Dunedin. Doc and the police are investigating. There are no signs they've been eaten by predators. Doc says tōroa are nationally vulnerable and reproduce slowly, so it's devastating. In sport, New Zealand golfer Steve Alker says never in his wildest dreams did he imagine he'd enjoy the success he has on the star-studded PGA Champions Tour. The 51-year-old from Hamilton has picked up a $1.6 million bonus and finished the year with more than $7 million in prize money after taking out the season-long Charles Schwab Cup. Alker won the title with a third-place finish at the season-ending tournament in Arizona.
It's a dream come true. We've just been kind of building up to this time during the year, knowing that it's probably going to come down to the wire. I mean, Podrick played amazing this week and he kept me on my toes. He knew what he had to do. He did what he did. And fortunately, I was good enough to do what I did as well.
Red Bull teammates Sergio Perez and double world champion Max Verstappen are at loggerheads after Verstappen ignored team orders in the Brazilian Grand Prix. Perez allowed Verstappen to overtake him on the understanding the position would be returned if the Dutch driver couldn't pass Alpine's Fernando Alonso for 5th place.
Max, let Checo through, please.
I told you already last time. You guys don't ask that again to me. Are we clear about that?
I'm sorry about that, Checo. We'll debrief everything afterwards.
Yeah, it shows who he really is.
Verstappen already has the driver's title sewn up, but Perez is still in the hunt for the runner-up spot. Britain's George Russell won the race. And Manchester United scored a stoppage winner to beat Fulham 2-1 to move them into the 5th place in English football's Premier League. That's the news.
The Black Ferns triumph.
From the depths of despair to World Cup winners once more. New Zealand are the champions.
A historic game changer.
All Blacks give young boys hope, but you Black Ferns give young girls power.
Inspiring future stars.
My 3-year-old, when she sees women selling out stadiums, how amazing is that? That's normal for her.
All In Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, fine today apart from isolated showers, becoming cloudy tomorrow with a few showers. From Waikato to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Partly cloudy today with scattered showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours. Fine tomorrow with isolated afternoon and evening showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly cloudy with occasional showers. Manawatu to Wellington, also for Wairarapa. Fine weather, isolated showers about the hill country for Manawatu tomorrow. Buller, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Cloud about Canterbury and coastal Otago tomorrow morning. For Westland, mainly fine today. Cloudy periods tomorrow with showers south of the glaciers. Fiordland, occasional rain developing this afternoon. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, rain developing tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. I will have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A man is fighting for his life in Christchurch tonight after being stabbed while walking his dog this morning. He was found with multiple stab wounds in Bexley Park, and joining us now is Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves. Kia ora, Detective.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Can you start off by just telling us how this man's doing?
He remains in a critical condition. He's undergone surgery today, but critical is the status that he's at.
What can you tell us about how things unfolded this morning? How did his family realise something was wrong?
So this man walks his dog on a regular occasion early in the morning. He's left his home at about 4:45 to walk the dog. The dog has actually returned home, and it's his family who has seen that the dog's home, but he's not, and that's happened at about 5:45. They've obviously been alarmed. They've hopped in their car and gone for a bit of a drive, and then they have found him sort of at the entrance to the Bexley Reserve. They've obviously seen that he's in a bad way and called an ambulance, and that's how we've become aware of what's happened.
We're losing you just a little bit on your phone line there, Detective. I might just get you to move because we really do want to hear what you're saying here. When you say the entrance to the park, for people not from the area, what road are you talking about?
So this is the Bexley Reserve, and the entrance that I'm referring to is on Pages Road.
Okay. So that was quite an early time to set off. What do you know about other people in the park at the time?
We're not sure about anybody in the park. Obviously, at that time of the morning, and people are going to work. Pages Road is quite a main thoroughfare from our eastern suburbs, sort of heading towards the central part of the city. So we do know from our CCTV cameras in the area that there are quite a few cars on the road at that time.
And so you're appealing to the public who may have dash cam, is that right?
Yes, people who may have dash cam, people who were travelling on that road, kind of at that 4:30 to 6 a.m. Time, who may have seen something, who might not even realise that they've seen something of importance. We would really like to get in touch with those people.
Is there any CCTV cameras or security cameras around that area?
So today we've had quite a large team of police in the area who are door knocking at our residences and any businesses in the nearby area, asking if anybody's seen anything, do they have any CCTV footage. We have collected some from nearby, and as you can imagine, it just takes a little while to get through that. So we've got officers at the moment that are just sitting down, looking through that CCTV. We don't know if we've got anything of value off it, but we have some that we're looking through.
I know it is very early in this investigation, but what impressions do you have about whether this is targeted or not?
You're right, it is really early. And at this stage, I guess the best thing I can say about it is that it is unexplained. We don't know what the motivation is. We don't know in terms of if he was targeted, why he was targeted. And I guess this is where we are appealing for the public to help us piece together what has happened to our victim. So we're working backwards essentially from about 6:20 in the morning when we were notified to find out what's happened before then. And we've asked members of the public from about 4 a.m. if they saw anything, they saw any people that they thought were a bit suspicious or acting a bit funny, to come forward and let us know. We know this man left his home at 4:45. We've said 4 a.m. because we want people thinking back a little bit further if they notice anybody in the area or any kind of strange cars, strange behaviour.
Detective, do you know who you're looking for? Do you have a suspect?
Not at this stage. We've got a number of, like I said, about vehicles, and we're trying to identify, people who are coming and going from the area in their cars. So we're just working through that. And in terms of a really good suspect, not at this stage.
Have you had any other reports of, incidents, strange going on in the park in recent times?
No, we've had a few people call in today, I guess, with bits and pieces of behaviour that they have seen, that they have thought is a wee bit strange. But none of that is looking like it's linked to what has happened this morning.
When this man was found, was he conscious? Was he able to tell his family anything?
He was conscious. He was obviously not in a very good way, and unfortunately, we've obviously not been in a position to speak with him about what's happened. So we're obviously hoping that that will happen in due course.
The dog, because people might have seen it. What kind of dog is it?
We are just going to hang on to the description of the dog and of our victim at the moment, just in terms of a bit of privacy for the family while they are just focusing on the recovery hopeful recovery of their loved one in hospital. So that might be something that we release in the future, but we're just not at this stage.
Detective, is there any suggestion that there may be forensic evidence on the animal?
So we have had a number of officers at the scene today. where our victim was found. We've had our ESR team doing the scene examination along with our scene of crime officers, our fingerprint officers, to see if we can find any forensic evidence at the scene that will help us identify who's responsible. We have examined the dog as well, in case he may have come to his owner's aid. But as you
mean may have bitten someone or have some DNA present?
Bitten or scratched or something like that, jumped up. We've done that examination of the dog. Obviously, those type of results take a wee while to get through, so that's not something that we, will be able to answer in the immediate sort of days. Understand.
Do you have the weapon used?
That is something that I'm just going to keep within the investigation at the moment, Lisa.
Okay. So given you can't say categorically whether this was a targeted attack or not, what's your advice to the public about the park and the surrounding area?
Yeah, I guess this goes for, all the time really. It's just we want people to be safe. We want them to be, to be able to get out there and enjoy our great city. So we just want people to stay alert when they're out. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of who's around you. Travel with a friend if you can. I guess if you can't, then tell someone where you're going, when you expect to come back or get to where you're going. And obviously, because this happened at the very early hours of the morning, it's still dark. Stay in really well lit areas if you can. So that would be my advice to the public.
And what about increased police presence or patrols?
Yep, absolutely, Lisa. We, Canterbury Police are incredibly concerned about what's happened here today, and would like to reassure the Bexley residents that we do have increased patrolling that will be focused on their area and surrounding areas.
Do you have any knowledge of someone who may give you cause for concern or someone known to you being in that area at the time of this attack?
We're probably a bit too soon to comment, I guess, on any individuals as such. We've got a number of lines of inquiry that we are working through, and I guess we are hoping that some of that will shed some light on what's happened and hopefully point us in the right direction of who our offender or offenders are.
Thank you for your time this evening. That's Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves there. It is almost 17 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Most of us are all too aware of what a kick in the teeth a bill from the dentist can be. New Zealanders spend $2.5 million a day on dental care, averaging $350 per visit, which is crippling our vulnerable communities. A report says nearly half the country can't afford dental care, and a leading doctors group has called for universal dental care. Our reporter Jonty Dine and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
A trip to the dentist can be a painful experience, not just for your teeth, but also your pocket. With nearly half of adults not having their needs met due to cost, medical professionals are calling for universal dental care in Aotearoa. So, what do people think about that?
Yeah, definitely.
To be honest, yeah.
Cheaper but free to some families.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, to children up to, say, 25 when they finish university. Apart from that...
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, I would. Yes.
No, I don't think it should be free, but more subsidies, certainly.
A new report shows 40% of adults in Aotearoa actively avoid dental treatment because of the cost.
Please see Mary with several decayed teeth, causing her pain and being unable to sleep. She's on a sickness benefit and cannot afford dental care. She doesn't meet our criteria for care, so we decline her and she has to find care somewhere else. Hemi needs to get his tooth taken out because it's causing him severe pain and headaches. He has needed to take time off work and cannot afford to go private. Again, we can't help him and we decline his request for care.
Auckland Te Whatu Ora dentist Hugh Trengrove expressed his frustration at working in a system that denies people health care.
It's very frustrating. It's sad. There are people who've got terrible dental needs and other health problems that can't access services. And they're services that I believe we have a fundamental right to. And if they were in a different area, for example, medicine, if you had a cough, you go and see a doctor. You may have to pay a part charge, but it's covered. For dentistry, you have a sore tooth, that's yours, suck it up.
Dr Trengrove says those without the means to seek treatment are left with few options.
Well, your options are do it yourself, and there's an increasing amount of do it yourself. And so people are taking measures at home with pliers and other implements to remove problematic teeth. People put up with it, or they medicate, typically with alcohol and all the other social problems that come with that. Or they go to a relief of pain service and have the tooth removed, so they won't have a root canal done.
The Auckland City Mission today launched Tooth Be Told, a campaign to promote free dental care in the country. Brooke Stanley-Powell of Auckland Action Against Poverty says health costs are a huge contributing factor to poverty.
Many of the people that we see just don't even go to the dentist because cost is the barrier.
Ms Powell says dental health is not prioritised in the vulnerable communities that she serves.
These are people who often need their teeth removed or are in a lot of pain, and so, I mean, those things don't just happen overnight. They happen over quite a sustained period of time, and just got to reflect actually the poor ways in which, it just goes to reflect how people aren't accessing dental care in Aotearoa.
She says among those most at risk include Māori and Pacifica, disabled people and solo parents.
People feel, I think the biggest thing is shame. People feel embarrassed about missing teeth. They don't feel good about themselves. I mean, I think this isn't just for the people that we serve, I think it's across the board. And so, there's lots of things that kind of are connected to people not having good oral health.
Association of Salaried Medical Specialists Chief Executive Sarah Dalton says free or subsidised access to dental care will save millions of dollars in healthcare over time.
We have the second highest sugar consumption in the OECD, which is, a big contributor to preventable disease.
With one of the highest rates of sugar consumption in the OECD, Ms Dalton says children are at great risk of oral health issues.
More than 8,000 children had to be given a general anaesthetic so that most or all of their teeth could be removed. It's called a full dental clearance. That was in 2021. All of that was preventable.
Ms Dalton says Aotearoa also has the lowest number of dentists per capita, and these are overrepresented in wealthier communities. Aucklanders were unanimous in their support for universal dental care.
Thankfully, I have family members that do like a yearly thing for me, which is great, but no, literally, if I had to pay for it, I wouldn't be going to the dentist. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I can't afford it.
I can't pick up a new smile until I pay that money. So that's money that I'm going to have to, personally loan from somewhere to get a smile back.
It's great that we have that back home, and really does make a difference to people that perhaps can't afford private care. Especially dentistry, it's really expensive for a lot of even just the basic work that people might need done.
The older you get, the more you need. So, I think that universal healthcare for dentistry is a must.
OK, I'm sure you're going to have lots of opinions on that one. Let us know what you think. 2101 on text, or you can get in touch via email at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Let us know your dental experiences. Is it affordable? How much did you pay last time you went? How long has it been since you went? Should it be free? 22 after 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback. You can tell us about teeth or anything else you've heard on the programme this evening. Text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. If you've done any DIY work, we'd like to hear about that too. It is time for the headlines now. Ko Ewe anō tēnei.
That sounds ouchy. Police say a dog walker attacked in the Christchurch suburb of Bexley this morning was repeatedly stabbed. The man was found by his family after his dog went home without him. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves told Checkpoint the police are appealing to anyone who might have dashcam footage or were travelling on Pages Road near Bexley Park between 4:30am and 6am this morning. The families of 2 murdered young women have made tearful opening statements to the coroner's court in Christchurch today. 27-year-old Nicole Tuxford was raped and murdered by Paul Tainui in 2018 while he was on life parole for the rape and murder of 21-year-old Kimberly Schroeder in 1994. The inquest is set down for 2 weeks. The acting Prime Minister says countries must prepare to support Ukraine for a long time. Ministers have agreed to extend New Zealand's defence deployments, supporting Ukraine with personnel staying in Europe until at least the middle of next year. An Auckland councillor says it doesn't matter if a second crossing over the Waitemata Harbour is a bridge or a tunnel, as long as it gets done quickly. Transport Minister Michael Wood yesterday announced the government will consult Aucklanders on what another crossing should look like. And 4 northern royal albatross eggs are missing from Taiaroa Head Colony near Dunedin. Department of Conservation compliance officers and the police are investigating. There are no signs they have been eaten by predators. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, no unusual delays on the main routes. Northbound lanes on the Waikato Expressway between Horetiu and Taupiri will be closed every night this week from 7 p.m, not opening until 5 in the morning. And in Wellington, the Terrace Tunnel section of State Highway 1 is closed tonight. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Ngā mihi, Evie. The possibility of a World Cup double looms for 2 of New Zealand's women's oval balls teams in the wake of the Black Ferns rugby triumph at the weekend. The Kiwi Ferns line up in the semi-finals of Rugby League's global tournament in England tomorrow morning. Here with more is sports reporter Guy Wilson. Before we move on, are you still basking in the glory?
There's a lot of
you feel like you were
excitement
there
in the
yourself
studio,
playing.
isn't there, about Saturday night?
Yeah, Evie's still buzzing. So good.
It was a pretty amazing moment, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was a bit touch and go when the dog ate the remote and I couldn't get the TV to turn on, but it all worked out in the end, Clay. Maybe that was an omen.
Not the homework. I thought it was the homework with the dog.
No, it was literally the remote. But is it too soon to hope for a repeat this week?
Wow, I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it? It'd be something if they could back that up and just sort of put the icing on the cake with the Kiwi Ferns doing it. And it's very much a possibility. They play England in the semi-final tomorrow morning. And while England are the host nation, they're ranked 3rd in the world, Kiwi Ferns definitely go into this game as favourites. England had an easier pool, but New Zealand had to play Australia in pool play, and what that meant is they got a hard game, and they pushed them, and they showed they can actually. Australia are very much the favourites in this women's Rugby League World Cup, and certainly from the Kiwi Ferns' perspective, they're confident. Halfback Racine McGregor, she said, "We're not phased about England, and if we play like we've been playing, we're going to beat them." So pretty confident that they'll get through to the final. Australia play Papua New Guinea in the other final. Very heavily favoured to get through, so it really looms as that expected New Zealand versus Australia final for the women. That'll be on Sunday morning New Zealand time. So in the space of 8 days, we could have a couple of World Cups.
So what time do you have to get up to watch that? Because there'll be a few people still feeling the pain from getting up this morning, eh?
Tomorrow morning's game 8:30, and then I think around the similar
that's
time.
Quite sociable.
Yeah, I think around breakfast time on Sunday is the final if they get through this game against England. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to golf. Pretty good year for Kiwi golfers. Steve Alker.
It's a real come from nowhere story, this for Steve Alker.
Come from nowhere and get a big check.
A very big check, which I'll mention. So he's won the season-long title on the PGA Champions Tour. And what the Champions Tour is a tour for golfers 50 years and over. And people might think of that and think, oh, well, perhaps it's a less of an achievement. But some of the names on this tour are some of the names that people that are golf fans will definitely recognise, the likes of Patrick Harrington, who he beat to win this title, Retief Hoosen, Jim Furyk, Ernie Els, some of the big names that have won a lot of majors in world golf. So Steve Alker is today just winning this title. He won $1.6 million New Zealand, and because he's had such a great season to win this title, his season earnings for this year are over $7 million New Zealand dollars. And this is from a guy who probably didn't earn this much in his whole career before that, which was around 25 years on various tours. He joined this Champions Tour about 15 months ago, and he's just been amazing since he's joined the tour.
So what's clicked, you know?
I don't know. I think he said that he prepared well for it, but he said there's no secret sauce to it, that he just done the same old things, and perhaps he's, I don't know, maybe a bit more relaxed or a change of pace being on a seniors tour, because he came on, he played on 6 odd tours around the world. He was a bit of a journeyman, really, when it came to world golf. He sort of battled away through his whole career, and he's come on. He won one event last year, but had a whole bunch of top tens, and then this year finished second in the first event of the year, 3 wins before the end of May, And then he's been at the top of those rankings, and he hasn't given up the lead. I think he's had something like 15 top 10s or something ridiculous this year, 5 wins. So pretty spectacular to come from where he was 18 months ago, here now. Not only a lot more money in the bank, but a lot more wins to his name, and just it's really one of the commentators said after the win today, one of the stories of the year for the sport, and it really is. It's been a remarkable turnaround for him.
Yeah, well, the Kiwis are on a winning streak at the moment. Let's hope it sticks. Thank you, Clay. Clay Wilson with sport there. You know how they say one person's trash is another's treasure? Well, sometimes it's just junk to everyone. And Auckland Council is warning people not to illegally dump it or it could cost you. Roadside dumping peaks between now and January in the super city, and we're talking at least 32 tonnes a year. Here's Auckland Council Senior Waste Advisor Jan Ecclesley.
It's a significant problem across Auckland, particularly going into the Christmas period. We find people have more stuff to dump and perhaps less time to find out how to dispose of it properly. So, yeah, we do notice a spike over the December-January period, and it's beginning to kick in now.
What do you reckon, Jan? They're making way for the Christmas presents or what have you?
I think partly that. People have the time to have a good clear out. They want to get their garage sorted. They want to shift the stuff from underneath their house. Maybe they're doing more house moves. And it's just that what we see is that people organise a good house move, they organise a good clear out, but they don't think ahead about what they're going to do with the rubbish at the end of the day. And everybody's tired then. Nobody wants to do the trip to the tip, and maybe it's closed, and that's when people start making the wrong decision.
Can you give us an idea of the volume that is dumped?
Well, one comparison is that it's around 3,500 grand pianos.
So that's a lot of junk. Okay.
It is, yes.
And well, you know what they say. Some people's trash is another person's treasure. Is it that they just kind of want to recycle by giving someone the opportunity to take it away for them?
Sometimes that's the case, and I think they're being hopeful. We call it wish cycling, where people will leave something on the berm in the anticipation that someone else will remove it. But if it's left overnight and it rains or it gets a heavy dew, then things like sofas and mattresses aren't going to be picked up the next day by somebody driving past. And if you don't put it even outside your own property, then it's pretty much like you're washing your hands of it when you dump it down the street. So if you have stuff to give away, there are other places to do it, or you can leave it on your driveway, but please don't put it on the burn because it's likely to attract other rubbish.
Wish cycling, I love that, because that's the fridges and the TVs that don't actually work, so nobody's going to want them, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and does it attract other problems? You say if people see a pile of junk, they tend to add to it?
Other people might add to that pile. It might prompt other people down the street to think, oh, I'll just put mine out as well, and very quickly it can escalate into a whole street going downhill because of the amount of rubbish that suddenly starts appearing out on the berm.
So is it illegal?
It's definitely illegal, yes. Don't put it on the berm. The only thing that should go on the berm or the footpath is your rubbish and your recycle bin on collection day.
So what could happen to you if you just toss it out there on the berm?
Well, what we try to do is educate people first. We give them the opportunity to take it back onto their property. But if we're in a position where that doesn't happen, then ultimately you might get a fine, and it can be up to $400.
And so what are you doing? Are you actively policing it? Do you what? Well, you kind of dive around in the junk to see if you can get any clues as to who it belongs to?
We do. When we get reports of illegal dumping, we will go to the properties in the immediate area to see if anybody's seen anything, or perhaps somebody might have a security camera on the house which might have caught the dumper in action. We knock on doors to see if the person who put the rubbishes there is living in the house, and advise them to take it back in. And yes, we do go through bags, and we have a lot of success finding evidence in dump rubbish.
We used to have the inorganic collection, right? Where you had a day where you all chucked it out there on the front grass verge, and then the big truck came around and picked it up. What happens now? Can you still take advantage of that?
We still have an inorganic collection. The difference is that what you do now is you book the collection and then you keep the items on your property instead of putting them out on the berm, because we had a big problem with health and safety issues when stuff was put on the berm. We had TVs being smashed and scavengers driving along the streets trying to get stuff, and kids walking to school amongst broken items. It really wasn't safe at all. And the stuff was put out for weeks in advance of the collection and would remain there afterwards as well. So the current system where you book a collection, it's cleared from your property, it avoids all that. And I think if people cast their mind back to what the inorganic collection used to look like, they'll realise it's actually a much better system now.
I have to say, Jan, you used to get some great finds in the inorganic collection, though. Come on.
You did, yeah. And what happens now is we manage to reuse or recycle more of it because it doesn't just get stuck in one truck. We have 2 trucks that go round. One is taking the stuff that's completely has no life left in it, and the other truck takes the stuff that's reusable or recyclable. And those items go to community groups. They're all taken to a warehouse and assessed for their sort of reusability. And community groups can register and then take those to give to their people they know in their neighbourhood or for selling in their shop, that sort of thing.
So that inorganic collection that you can program in, basically, do you have to pay for it? And how many times a year can you take advantage?
No, it's rates funded, like the other one was, and it's a once-a-year collection. So the only difference is that you have to book it and you keep it on your property. But in every other respect, it's the same as the previous inorganic collection.
Well, Jan, there's no excuse then, is there?
You would think not. And if the inorganic collection isn't working for you, then you can take your items to your local transfer station, and in some places there might be a community recycling centre there which will take your items at no charge.
Would it be fair to say then, Jan, if we are brutally honest, laziness is at the very core of this problem?
It's definitely a factor. I think also time pressure is another one. People are very busy, and they'll do a big clear out, and at the end of the day they just run out of time, and nobody wants the rubbish to sit on their own property. But that's what we have to accept. If you run out of time to take it to the tip, then you need to keep it on your property it's only till the next day. Most tips are open 7 days a week.
And that was Jan Eckersley from Auckland Council. Now, she's urging people to get ready for Christmas. Think about what you're buying, because the more you buy, the more packaging you're going to have to throw out. And we don't condone rubbish dumping here at Checkpoint. But Evie, are you a scavenger?
I do enjoy particularly scavenging plants.
Right.
I've found many plants, and in fact, I once found a 5-metre hedge.
Wow.
And it grew.
I just remember when you used to have the massive inorganic collection, people would rush to the posher burbs and pick up...
People would rush, would they,
Yes,
Lisa?
people with trailers. Never used a trailer, Evie, but I have, been out there looking for... a little recycle, if you like. Anyway, let us know your thoughts on that one, 2101. It is 25 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. Thanks for joining us in the studio. Strong expansion makes the service sector a global outlier. Okay, what are the numbers?
Like really strong numbers. Strong, yeah. So the latest Performance of Services Index. So on Friday we had manufacturing. That's the regarding durable goods. Services are things like a hairdresser, a restaurant, that kind of stuff. Things you consume or what have you. That kind of idea. Okay, so we were at 57.4. Now, 50 indicates expansion. But when we talk about sales, we're talking about like 61 points. That's huge. And in some sectors, for example, cultural, recreation, and personal, the number is 90.6. That's exceptionally high. More than you would imagine could be sustainable. But how that translates into the world numbers is that when you look at the United States, the Eurozone, the UK, China, Australia, they're all in contraction. And here we are at 57.4. Even Japan at 53.2 is still not anywhere near our level.
It's kind of surprising because those are the sectors that are all screaming out for staff and are constrained by the fact that they can't get enough workers.
Yeah, so apparently we're doing quite well. And the indications are we'll do even better, with China now looking like they're going to ease up on some restrictions. The Chinese tourists are, the biggest and most significant group, and we haven't seen them. But once they arrive, there'll be even more growth in the services sector. So there's a bright light ahead there, and it points to economic growth in the third and leading into the fourth quarter. So where's that momentum going to take us? Could be that our economy ends up growing because of the strength of the service sector. Too soon to say now, but certainly the activity we've been seeing over the last 5 months has been expansion and likely to continue.
Okay, tell us about the value value of the New Zealand dollar.
Well, there's another good economic story to tell you, depending, of course, if you're an exporter or an importer. In inflation, our battle with inflation, it's certainly a positive. The New Zealand dollar was just over 61 cents over the weekend. It got
US?
Yes, US cents. It got to 61.3. At the moment, it's about 61 cents. And that's, when we think back, 55 cents just about a month ago.
And 53 at one point, wasn't it?
I don't know, it was pretty low. I don't even want to talk about it. It was so bad, I didn't even want to bring you the numbers. But, a 61 cent US dollar certainly will help importers. And that means that potentially will help our inflation rate for consumption. Exporters, maybe they're not feeling the love as much, but overall, 61 cents is a pretty strong number, and it's partly because of what's happening in China. It looks like things are getting better in China on the Chinese property market, for example. Also, the U.S. inflation is coming down, and so overall, that gives the New Zealand dollar more upside, so we'll see what happens there.
Okay, get your sprinting shoes on. Tell us the rest.
All right, so the top 50 index, it fell 0.7%. Could be because of the dollar. That could make a difference for our exporting manufacturers. So 0.7 fall, 80-point drop to 11,232. The Kiwi is stronger, of course, I just said, at 61 US cents, around about 91.1 Australian and 51.8 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Third-year nursing students are pleading to be paid during their hospital placements, with many feeling broken and abused by the system before they're even fully trained. On Checkpoint on Friday, Health Minister Andrew Little conceded they probably should get some financial support in the last year of their study, and the issue is under discussion. Third-year AUT trainee nurses have described travelling long distances to unpaid hospital placements that are up to 40 hours a week, having to cover the cost of petrol, uniforms and food while studying, and holding down paid work too. 40% plus of AUT nursing students do not graduate. So what more can be done to keep them in the system? Well, joining us now is National's health spokesperson, Dr. Shane Reti. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. Good to speak with you.
Do you think that trainee nurses should be paid during placements in their third year?
So I think if we look at the essential services that have third-year placements, then if we were to pay trainee nurses, then we should also pay fourth and fifth-year medical students, final-year engineers in certain scopes of practice. And so one would have to say that it would then spread across all of them. That's a much bigger discussion. The prime issue here is the cost of living, and there are the macroeconomic things that Nicola Willis and our team talk about that can address that. But then there are things around student support that can also be done. So I think we need to take all of these factors into account.
So are you ruling out, and is National ruling out, any payment to trainee nurses during their third year of placement?
What I've said is that we'll explore other options, including student support. But let's also remember that no other Five Eyes country supports their final year nursing students in this way. So we're in keeping with our international peers, but absolutely understand, they email me every day as well, absolutely understand that the cost of living is really hurting them, and they're having to make choices, and that choice sometimes is to leave their career, and that's what we need to figure out.
Does it really matter that much what our Five Eyes partners are doing in terms of paying nurses during placement? Because, sometimes you want to lead, not follow.
Yes, it does, because it's always being made that Australia pays more than we do, and why don't we do like Australia does? Well, they're not doing this either, because, again, you would have to answer that equity principle about what about every other third-year course that is also an essential service, also in a crisis, and also doing practicums.
So when you talk about perhaps offering some assistance in a different way, right, through student allowances or something, explain to me, what might that look like? What things would you consider?
Yes, look, and again, these are just sort of on the table, so they're not form policy at the moment, but we'd want to think about, is there travel allowance, is there uniform allowance, could it be through accommodation allowance? What parts of cost of living could we most have impact with while we're looking to pull the main cost of living levers that Nicola's working on?
So, is it fair to say that you accept that the nurses are in a difficult situation, the trainee nurses are in a difficult situation, and they need some assistance? It is the shape of that assistance which is up for discussion within National, but you would have something for them.
What's fair to say is that we need to figure out how to retain them, because we lose 14% in year one, and then by year 5 we've lost 29% of a graduating class, and that's an investment that they've had in themselves, that the taxpayers had in them. How do we figure that out?
Well, part of it is simple, isn't it? Because it is money when you talk to them, and the lack of that they have, and their responsibilities that they have to cover, which means it's prohibitive to work for money in some cases. If you're doing 40 hours in a hospital placement, keeping up your study, it's very difficult to hold down a paying job. So the answer is reasonably simple in some situations. It's money. It's about who pays and how, isn't it?
It's the same example for a 4th and 5th year medical student, for dental students, for engineering students. This is a similar example, but they're confronting rent increases from choices that the government has made as well. And so we're interested in how we can ease that burden.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is Dr. Shane Reti, who's National's health spokesperson there. Let us know your thoughts on that one, 2101 on text. It is 5:45 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, let us know your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. On the subject of student nurses and whether they need to be paid or not during placement, should there be payment for other things like petrol allowances, cost of living to ease the burden? If so, why? And what about other trainee professions, as Dr. Reti mentioned there? 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now. Anea Evie, mena pitipiti kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. The mother of Nicole Tuxford says she hopes an inquest will answer the many questions she has. The families of 2 murdered young women have made tearful opening statements to the coroner's court in Christchurch today. 27-year-old Nicole Tuxford was raped and murdered by Paul Tainui in 2018 while he was on life parole for the rape and murder of 21-year-old Kimberly Schroeder in 1994. The Sports Minister says a public parade to celebrate the Black Ferns Rugby World Cup victory will be up to councils to organise. The government is looking at ways to officially recognise their success, with discussions underway to hold a public event at Parliament. Police say they'll work with authorities in South Korea to facilitate the extradition of a woman wanted for the deaths of 2 children whose bodies were found in suitcases in Auckland. The Seoul High Court granted the extradition request, and the woman will face charges for murder in New Zealand. The 42-year-old woman, thought to be the mother of the 2 children, was arrested near Seoul in September. And German scientists have suggested mushroom skin could be used to make computer chips and batteries to reduce electronic waste. The team says the skin is flexible, a good conductor and easily recyclable as it decomposes within a fortnight. They've developed a prototype they describe as groundbreaking, although it requires further testing. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, there's been a crash on State Highway 96 in Southland. The road is now closed between 100 Line Road East and Transmission Line Road. Eastbound travellers detour via Bush Road, 100 Line Road East, then back to State Highway 96. That will be the reverse for westbound travellers. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Let's get to some of your feedback. It's coming in, pretty quick on the dental costs, the issue of, I think it was approximately $350 on average for a dental appointment. This person says, I haven't been to a dentist for 5 years, and before that, hadn't been for 7 years. Rent or dentist? No-brainer, they say. B's got in touch and says, so sad my brother can't afford to go to the dentist. His teeth are rotting, and it's hard to understand him sometimes. It's affecting his speech. We desperately need some system to help those who can't afford dental care. I would agree to having it means tested, says B. Someone else says, increase the price of soft drinks 10 times, as we did with smokes. That'll make a difference, they say. And Andreas says, I do gardening for my dentist. Is that like, what do you call it, green dollar? Are you exchanging dental services for gardening? That's an interesting exchange. I wonder how many people could do that, though. On the subject of junk on the berm, this is people who are dumping their rubbish roadside. And a lot of you say the problem is that councils are charging too much for tip fees and it's unaffordable. This one from Nikki says, when will councils face it that their tip fees are overpriced? Many can't afford it, so they dump it. Another says, tip it illegally for free or do the right thing and we will charge you for it. Yeah, right. Well, the thing is, dumping it isn't free if you get caught. It will cost you up to $400. And I think that's probably a bit more expensive than the tip fees, but I take your point. And others are complaining about how much the council will take away in inorganic collection, the one that you could book in. Jan was saying you can book it in. Someone says they only take 1 cubic metre and it's arbitrary. They said they put out the rubbish, organised the collection. They took a tiny amount and left the rest. The collection is subcontracted. I complained and have never heard back, says Louise. Keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It has been an emotionally charged day at Coroner's Court in Christchurch as a joint inquest into a 2018 murder and sudden death got underway. The ashes of 27-year-old Nicole Tuxford, who was brutally raped and murdered in her own home by Paul Tainui, were brought into the court by her mother. Tainui was on life parole for the rape and murder of 21-year-old Kimberly Schroeder 24 years earlier, when he killed for the second time. Neva Chittick was in court.
A moment of silence permeated the court this morning, setting a sobering scene for the inquest. Family statements followed. Jenny Keegan, speaking on behalf of the Schroeder family, says they will never recover from the impact of the murders and the suspected suicide of Kimberly's father, Gary Schroeder, shortly after hearing Tainui had killed again. The parole board hearings were a particular source of pain for the family.
Every year from 2007 till 2010, we had to come up against the New Zealand Parole Board to fight to prevent Wilson's release. Each year, the family's re-traumatised.
The Schroeder family believes corrections did not properly listen to their concerns.
Our only words, having lost this battle to them, were, if you release him, he will do this again.
Sherry Gillette, Nicole Tuxford's mother, brought her daughter's ashes to court and sat them beside her as she spoke. She tearfully explained how she hoped the inquest would give her answers.
Our justice system and corrections and parole system are all broken. There are too many cracks, failures, miscommunications. Nicole's death and Gary's was prevented. So many unanswered questions remain.
But Stephen Tuxford, Miss Tuxford's father, says it would not help him.
I can tell you now, the outcome of this proceedings will not give me closure, nor justice for my family, as it will never return Nicole back to us. The only positive thing that could happen from this event is that this doesn't happen to another family, and this type of horrendous crime does not repeat itself.
The inquest will cover Paul Tainui's release and post-release management, among other topics. It is expected to run for 2 weeks.
It is 9 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. In Australia, emergency warnings have been issued after flash flooding in New South Wales. People in the central west of the state are being told to move to higher ground and avoid bridges. Phil Vine from World Watch reports.
There have been some extraordinary scenes around Orange and Moolong where a shipping container has been seen swept down the street.
The ferocity of the water heading down the Mitchell Highway to the point where it's moved a shipping container. And we don't know where that shipping container's come from at this present time, but it's moved it down to what we call the pool corner. So from the footage of the main street, it would be at least 60 to 70 metres down to the corner. So the shipping container's landed itself down there.
Kevin Beattie, mayor and long-time resident, says it's much worse than 2005, 1.5 metres higher.
But the devastation to the shops, having 2 metres of water through your some of the shops back down to a foot up the higher end of the street. To see them now as the water subsides to clean it up, and just the mud and the devastation, the damage.
Overnight and this morning, there have been 130 flood rescues with 10 helicopters in use. Greg Nash is from the State Emergency Service.
So the waters around the Ugower area did come up fairly quickly, and this is what has caused a substantial amount of rescues in the area. But again, we ask people to avoid the area, but if people are in the area and if it's safe to do so, to move to higher ground.
People have described waking in the night to howling wind and pouring rain. Residents were trapped, caught on the roofs of caravans, defence helicopters flying in for rescues. Kevin Beattie again. He's advising people to stay out of their cars.
We've got reports of a few bridges out, so driving into water, trying to cross a bridge that may not be there could result in fatalities. So definitely don't enter the water. But, I mean, we've got people trapped on roofs and so on. Entering the water is probably not an option.
New South Wales has been stretched because of multiple weather events. The government there is now looking to other places like New Zealand for assistance.
After a horrifying mid-air crash at an airshow in Texas, US authorities are working to identify those who died. 6 people were killed when 2 vintage military planes collided mid-air on Saturday and crashed in flames before a crowd of thousands who came to see them fly at a World War II commemorative airshow in Dallas. The BBC's Naomi Choi-Smith reports.
Emergency crews rushed to the crash site as shocked spectators looked on.
It's truly terrifying seeing something like that. It's not something you almost ever will see, and it's terrifying just seeing huge aircraft like that smash into the ground, and it's just something no one's prepared for.
The crowd packed with war veterans for the commemorative airshow at Dallas Executive Airport.
It's Veterans Day, and there was the largest body of veterans I've seen in a very long time there. And yes, when you see something like that, the first thing that goes like through your body is panic. And you could tell that throughout the entire crowd. The entire crowd was just in disbelief and panic.
No spectators were injured, but it's still unclear how many crew members were aboard. The smaller aircraft, a Bell P-63 King Cobra, is a single pilot plane. And the larger Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress bomber usually carries a crew of 4 to 5 people, organisers say.
Express some prayers and thoughts for the crews that were involved today, for the people that saw it, for the family members. Obviously, this is a very challenging time for those families. And when I say family, I meant the CAF family and our customers that follow us all over the world and enjoy our shows.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott posted about the tragedy on Twitter, and Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson called it heartbreaking, tweeting, "Please say a prayer for the souls who took to the sky to entertain and educate our families today." Both the Federal Aviation Administration and National Transportation Safety Board are investigating the crash.
Like a bridge over troubled waters, the debate for a second harbour crossing in Auckland rolls on. The government has opened up consultation to see what residents in the city of Sales want to help ease their commute. Transport Minister Michael Wood has opened consultation on the issue, asking if a new bridge or tunnel for Waitemata Harbour could be the way to go. Last year, the government scrapped an almost $1 billion walking and cycle bridge. Now it's gone back to the drawing board. Our reporter Finn Blackwell hit the streets to find out what the people want.
Bridge or tunnel, toll-free or not, many commuters say as long as it breaks up traffic, they're here for it.
It seems pretty obvious that something needs to be done to alleviate the pressure.
I don't see a problem in doing it. If it eases access and congestion and things like that, why not?
There were, however, some reservations when it came to paying for it.
Do you think you'd use it if it was a toll road?
We used to have to, but it would be better if it wasn't, of course. I think it could be a toll road. That's maybe one solution.
I would use it if it was, going to get me from A to B quicker.
Not really, no.
Auckland councillor Richard Hills crosses the harbour every day to get to work and says the second crossing has to deliver for residents.
It feels like we've been talking about it for a very long time, and it's a priority for myself and our community. So we just want to get on with it, really. So it would be good to hear our community's views, but get them in quick, because I would really like to see something confirmed by the middle of next year.
He says bridge or tunnel, it doesn't matter, as long as it gets done quickly.
It's going to be a massive asset to our city. So if it is a bridge, it will have, it could be a real signature asset for our city. If it's a tunnel, then that will be because it's faster and less expensive, maybe.
Auckland Chamber of Commerce CEO Simon Bridges feels the same.
I think they could be doing something like, continuing to talk, but actually making sure that they are getting on with the processes that will get to construction more quickly. It really is going to take a heck of a long time, even if they started today on construction.
He says a second harbour crossing is something that the city will need for the future.
Time is of the essence because the demand, at a level already there, it will absolutely be there when this nation-building project really is finished.
However, Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says the idea of another crossing isn't a pressing priority. While he thinks it's encouraging to see the government listening to Aucklanders, it's the public transport crisis he's got his sights on first. He says as many Aucklanders as possible should collaborate and share their thoughts, just as he will be doing as a private citizen. For John Reeves of the Public Transport Users Association, there's one major factor to consider.
This next crossing really needs to be dedicated to public transport, because at the end of the day, that's how our city is going to grow and move people around. But it really should be focused not on light rail, because light rail can't move a lot of people quickly. We need to look to the future, so we actually need to make sure it's for heavy rail.
Waka Kotahi has several events scheduled to engage with the community on what they want to see from a second Waitemata Harbour crossing.
Let us know your thoughts on that one, 2101 on text. What form should another harbour crossing take? Do we need one? Some of you might not want a second one. On the subject of dentists, this person says, I visited the dentist last month, had a filling, $1,300, but it was the first for 15 years. I visit the dentist annually and the dental hygienist every 6 months. Dental treatment should be for free or at least subsidised, but personal responsibility is essential, says Sheila. Stop drinking the rubbish sugar drinks. Okay, got the message, Sheila. Someone else says, I think dental work in New Zealand should definitely be free. My last visit for one tooth, $1,200, which I was lucky enough to pay in 2 instalments. Didn't go back to complete the job for weeks as I had to save up the second instalment. Although I'm not on the poverty line, I have to watch my spending as my income is just enough to cover expenses. Dentistry in this country is an outrageous cost. We know bad teeth is a health issue which affects the entire health of the body.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The Christchurch man who was repeatedly stabbed while walking his dog in Bexley Park was still conscious when he was found by a family member. He's critically injured in hospital and police say they don't yet have a suspect. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves told Checkpoint the man left home just before 5 in the morning and about an hour later his family saw the dog return alone.
They've obviously been alarmed, they've hopped in their car and gone for a bit of a drive, and then they have found him. He was conscious. He was obviously not in a very good way, and unfortunately we've obviously not been in a position to speak with him.
Detective Inspector Reeves says police don't have a suspect yet and they want to hear from drivers who might have noticed anything suspicious on Pages Road between 4:30 and 6 this morning. The families of 2 murdered young women have made tearful opening statements to the Coroner's Court in Christchurch today. 27-year-old Nicole Tuxford was raped and murdered by Paul Tainui in 2018 while he was on life parole for the rape and murder of 21-year-old Kimberly Schroeder in 1994. Ms Tuxford's mother, Cherie Gillette, hopes the inquest will answer the many questions she has. Ms Gillette says she specifically wants to know why corrections chose to believe a convicted murderer over a victim's family. The inquest will look specifically at Nicole Tuxford's murder and sudden death of the first victim's father shortly afterwards. A public health dentist says he laments the fact he works in a system that turns away people in need of care. The Auckland City Mission today launched Tooth Be Told, a campaign to promote free dental care in the country. Auckland Te Whatu Order dentist Hugh Trengrove says the current criteria to qualify for hospital dental treatment is putting barriers in front of those in need. He cited a typical rejection.
Hemi needs to get his tooth taken out because it's causing him severe pain and headaches. He has needed to take time off work and cannot afford to go private. Again, we can't help him and we decline his request for care.
New Zealanders spend $2.5 million a day on dental care, averaging $350 per visit, an amount that is crippling vulnerable communities. The government has shown little appetite to shake up the electricity sector, as called for by a trade union report. A paper co-authored by First Union, the Council of Trade Unions, and Climate Group 350 says power companies have been paying out billions more in dividends than they've been making in profits. It wants the big firms to be required to channel the payouts into building renewable generating capacity. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says that's not on his agenda.
I will take the time to read the report, and I continue to say what I've previously said, that at a time where cost of living is high, we have expectations upon our large companies to bear in mind the position of their customers.
One of the report's authors, Craig Rennie from the CTU, used to work in Mr Robertson's office. The sister of a Whangarei murder victim has paid tribute to her amazing sibling and acknowledged the pain his killer's family is also enduring. This afternoon, a 21-year-old man was found guilty of murdering Hayes Pehopa in a horrific stabbing in the CBD in June last year. Sam Ollie reports.
Mr Pehopa's older sister, Kate Karena, says he loved life so much and was happier than ever last year. He was a proud Ngāpuhi man, she says, who could make you laugh and make you smile without even flinching. She says he had a heart of gold and loved working hard in a forestry crew. Ms Karena says both her family and the killers have been hurting and have been as respectful as they could. The killer's younger brother and co-accused was found not guilty of murder.
New analysis shows hate speech has accelerated on Twitter since Elon Musk took control of the social media platform. The monitoring group, the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, found certain racist, anti-Semitic and homophobic words were used up to 77% more often in the week following the takeover. Twitter says it's committed to content moderation. And an investigation is underway into the disappearance of 4 northern royal albatross eggs from a colony near Dunedin. The discovery was made on Thursday morning during routine checks at Taiaroa Head. Tess Brunton reports.
Security camera footage is being gathered as Department of Conservation compliance officers and the police investigate the missing eggs. There are no signs they have been eaten by predators. Dock Coastal Otago Operations Manager Annie Wallace says it's strange for eggs to disappear without a trace, as the colony has been managed and monitored for years. She says it's devastating as Toaroa are nationally vulnerable and reproduce slowly. It is an offence under the Wildlife Act to kill, injure, harass or disturb them. Anyone with information can call the Dock hotline.
That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we find out what happens to the rest of the pig after we've kept the parts we want to eat. The food chain. Slippery creatures, where do they come from? The origins of eels have been mystifying scientists for centuries. We have the answers, and researchers have identified which neurons, when electrically stimulated, can restore the ability to walk in paralysed patients. And Dragon is our essential New Zealand album. That's on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, fine today apart from isolated showers, becoming cloudy tomorrow with a few showers. Waikato to Whanganui, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Partly cloudy today with scattered showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours. Fine tomorrow with isolated afternoon and evening showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly cloudy with occasional showers. Manawatu to Wellington, also for Waded Upper. Fine weather, isolated showers about the hill country for Manawatu tomorrow. Bulla, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Cloud about Canterbury and coastal Otago tomorrow morning. For Westland, mainly fine today. Cloudy periods tomorrow with showers south of the glaciers. Fiordland, occasional rain developing from this afternoon, and Kohu, Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, rain developing tomorrow. It's 6 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New Zealand's defence deployments supporting Ukraine have been extended, with personnel staying in Europe until at least the middle of next year. Soldiers gathering intelligence and providing administration and logistical support were due to return home in a few weeks' time, but will now stay until June or July. More than 60 New Zealand troops will take over from the 120 personnel training Ukrainian soldiers in the UK. The Defence Minister, Pene Henare, was asked why New Zealand is reducing the size of the deployment training soldiers.
The fine balance we strike here is the opportunity for deployment, which is something that our personnel look towards as an opportunity in their career, but also making sure that, one, we have the ability to respond to matters here in New Zealand, domestically, and of course in the Pacific as we come into cyclone season. And then, of course, our 120 who have been there for the past few months, from all the feedback, are ready to come home.
The government is pumping another $1.85 million into the World Food Programme to help address global food insecurity. The same amount will also be contributed to the NATO Trust Fund for non-lethal military equipment and Ukraine's self-defence during the northern winter. Acting Prime Minister Grant Robertson says the government will continue to support Ukraine.
While the war continues, we believe that those who share our values have some responsibilities here. This is not a conflict, as you're all alluding to, that we know the end date of, and so we have to be prepared to continue to make these decisions. By taking ourselves out to mid-next year, we're clearly signalling our commitment.
And that was Acting Prime Minister Grant Robertson. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says investigators have uncovered new evidence of war crimes committed by the Russian occupiers of Kherson. The situation remains tense in the newly liberated city, with stocks of medicines and bread running out. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen reports.
How are you? You okay? Sunday morning shopping at the central market in Kherson, a town that wants desperately to be normal again, to relax into old rituals. A family outing without fear.
Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Героям слава!
Glory to Ukraine, until a few days ago, words that could land you in jail or worse.
Ukraine forever.
You're happy?
Yes, I'm happy. It's okay.
No Russians?
No Russians. I don't love Russia. Only Ukraine.
It is the best, said Titiana. A Sunday without Russians, even the air. I can breathe. Why did they beat him? Then she showed what her son, a former soldier, looked like after the Russians beat him for 10 days. After that, he escaped abroad. Like everyone I met in Kherson, Yuri's joy was complicated.
Happy moment inside, but you're still cautious because it's not happy story yet. We don't know what will happen. We're afraid of some shelling. We're afraid of some catastrophic blow somewhere nearby.
For the Ukrainians, the priority now is getting these people what they want. There's food for sale in the market, though not everybody has got money, but there's very little running water, electricity, there's no mobile network. More than anything else, though, what people need is security, because Kherson is still a war zone, the wider region, and the Russians are still within range. It says Kherson forever with Russia. The poster was meant to celebrate, not mock, the Kremlin's illegal annexation of Kherson at the end of September. On the same road, people queued at a hose connected to a well at a butter factory. Russia's legacy includes a crippled water system. That's why they're filling bottles from the Dnipro, the river that's also the first line of defense for Russians who've retreated to the other side. The water collectors barely noticed firing from Ukrainian artillery, which hit a target on the Russian-controlled bank. The roads running out into Kherson's coastal hinterland tell a story of changing fortunes in the war. In March, the Russians, still advancing to the Black Sea, won the battle here. They steamrolled it through a school dedicated to Lenin when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Ukraine's president says war crimes happened here. We saw as yet unidentified bodies left on the road until this morning, when victorious Ukrainian engineers moved back in. You can't live together as neighbors again, easily?
I don't want to see them nearby. If they will withdraw, and eventually they will, to their own borders, let them live there, and we just want them out of our land.
Back in Kherson, the central square was still packed with people, relieved the Russians are gone and celebrating survival and defiance. Slowly, then more loudly, they joined in with the Ukrainian national anthem. Emotions poured out of them. Occupations leave deep scars. For all the significance of Ukraine's victory in Kherson, it would be easier if it meant the people here could plan for peace. But they cannot, because this town's war is not over.
In the US, the blame game has begun with the Republican Party after its poor showing in the country's midterm elections. A succession of senior Republicans now say they don't believe Donald Trump should run for the presidency again in 2024. Many believe he's at least partly to blame for the results which saw them lose control of the Senate, with a defeat in the crucial state of Nevada. The Democrats, meanwhile, are pretty happy, as CNN's Gloria Pazmino reports.
This is such a cause for a celebration.
A celebration indeed for Democrats, who will now retain control of the Senate on Capitol Hill. The critical win comes after Nevada Democratic incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto defeated Republican challenger Adam Laxalt after trailing him for days as votes were counted.
We've known this was going to be a tough campaign, but like all of you, I'm a Nevadan, and I know what it takes to deliver for my home state.
We won because we had a really good agenda that we actually passed that helped the American people on things they cared about.
This should have been a huge red wave. It should have been one of the biggest red waves we've ever had because, the President Biden's approval rating was so low.
Democrats managed to hold at least 50 seats in the Senate. The victory comes as a major boost for President Joe Biden. Now the question remains, who will control the House? So far, Democrats hold 204 seats to Republicans' 211. The number needed to control the lower chamber is 218 seats.
Let's just get through the election, okay? They haven't won yet.
As I've said all along, it'd be perilously close. We can win it. Whether we're going to win it remains to be seen.
And we may not find out who wins the House for weeks. As the vote count continues in states like Arizona, California, and Oregon, with a large share of mail-in ballots.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The first death sentence against a demonstrator has been issued in Iran since nationwide protests were triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini 2 months ago. The Iranian judiciary website says an unnamed protester was found guilty of setting fire to a public building, disturbing public order and conspiring to commit crimes against national security. The BBC's Tom Bradell reports.
Defiance in the face of a deadly crackdown. The latest protests in Iran this weekend suggest the anti-government movement there still has momentum. But it's now facing a fresh challenge: capital punishment. At least 14,000 people have been arrested over the past 2 months. Now, for the first time, a court has sentenced one of them to death.
This particular one has been in Tehran's province, and we know that at least 6 other people have also been accused of those same heavy charges that carry the death penalty.
A range of crimes were levelled at the accused, from setting fire to a government building and disturbing public order to being an enemy of God and corruption on earth. Hundreds are facing similar charges for taking part in what authorities are characterising as riots. With this latest sentence, there'll be considerable concern over their fate.
There are some voices within Iran's government who are calling, for an iron fist to kill people, as many people as you can, so that the protesters can be deterred fully.
This iron fist has defined the regime's recent approach. At least 300 people have been killed, including children. But that's not stopped the unrest. Some in government want to avoid causing yet more anger and are calling for strategic restraint. But that now seems unlikely. What began as a challenge to Iran's strict dress code has transformed into a major challenge to the regime. Its leaders will hope the ruthlessness of the courts can strangle life out of the resistance.
The West Australian government is under pressure over its mistreatment of children in youth detention. Courts have found the state's unlawfully confining boys to their cells for nearly 24 hours a day in what one judge described as child abuse. An ABC investigation has uncovered footage of officers using a dangerous restraint on a teenager. Grace Tobin reports, and just a warning, details in this report may be upsetting to some listeners.
Stop resisting!
This is the sound of a boy with 5 youth detention officers on top of him.
Stop resisting and I'll ease it.
Moments before this, he'd hit a guard in the head with a mop. The officers restrain him using a practice known as folding up. He's pushed face down onto his cell bed as officers twist his arms behind his back. Another sits on his legs. He's told Four Corners he felt helpless.
It's basically the whole time. And they're trying to say, relax and it won't hurt. How are you supposed to relax? 4 or 5 blokes on top of you.
Steve is in his early teens. WA law prohibits us from using his real name, but he wants people to know what it's like for children in youth detention.
Boys like cry out for help, but they don't do nothing.
What would you hear?
Like they're screaming, crying, I want to kill myself, like swearing and all that.
A family member we're calling Deborah says she was devastated after watching the footage of Steve being folded up.
He's telling him he can't breathe. He can't breathe. And they're telling him to stop resisting. And I'm not saying that, what he did is right, but that could have been handled a hell of a lot differently.
Restraint positions like folding up or hog tying are banned in Queensland youth detention centres due to the risk of suffocation and death. They're not used by any police force in Australia. The WA Corrective Services Minister Bill Johnston says he's never heard of the practice.
I'm the minister. I don't personally work in the custodial estate. I'm not a youth custodial officer. It's not reasonable for me to know the specific details of any, allegations that might be made by a young offender.
In a statement, the Department of Justice said the restraint is only used as a last resort in the most extreme circumstances for as little time as possible. Every state and territory is facing scrutiny over conditions in youth detention. Australia is one of the only countries in the developed world to still lock up children as young as 10, a position condemned by Mick Gooder, who led the Northern Territory Royal Commission into the Dondale facility.
In 100 years' time, people are going to look at us and say, they locked kids up who were 10 and 11 and 12. What were they thinking to do with this? We'll be considered barbarians by future generations because we locked 10-year-olds up.
Four Corners has obtained a copy of a secret government report that reviewed the minimum age of criminal responsibility in 2020. It reveals that the majority of justice departments around the country recommended raising the age to 14 without exception. The report found detention can disrupt brain development, compound trauma and lead to more criminal offending. State governments and the Commonwealth say they are continuing to work on proposals to raise the age.
An investigation is underway after a deadly bombing in the Turkish capital. At least 6 people have been killed and 81 are wounded after a busy shopping street in downtown Istanbul was rocked by an explosion. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports.
Sunday afternoon, shoppers running for their lives. This was Istiklal Street, right after the blast. It's the very heart of Istanbul. As the casualties were rushed away, Turkey's president was offering his condolences and saying it appeared to be a terrorist attack. Initial developments and initial intelligence from the governor are that it smells like terrorism, said Recep Tayyip Erdogan. adding the culprits would be punished. Turkey's Justice Ministry now says the bomber was a woman who had sat on a bench in the area for 40 minutes before the blast. It was the first major bomb attack in Istanbul in years. Well, Istiklal remains sealed off now. There is a heavy police presence, but this is normally one of the busiest places in Istanbul, an area that is crammed with visitors and with shoppers. Now police are carrying out their investigations, and there is a real sense among people here of anxiety. For Istanbul, this has come as a shock. Hayat told us she was in an internet cafe on Istiklal and rushed out to see dead and injured. What I saw was a pram, she said. I saw wounded people running around. There was a woman running, carrying her dog. It was a frenzy. As night fell, the shadow of an old fear. This city has been bombed in the past by both Kurdish separatists and Islamist militants. People here wondering, are we back to that?
Another major city's gone into lockdown in China as the government considers relaxing its hardline zero COVID policy. At least 5 million people in Chongqing in the southwest are being told to stay in their apartments. The ABC's Bill Birtles reports.
In China's capital, lining up for a COVID test has become a daily routine for many residents. As COVID cases went above 200 in Beijing for the first time, people in some areas have been told to line up for a PCR test every day. Others have been put under lockdown by local officials, who put entire buildings under stay-at-home orders if there's a single case. Michael Huang, a businessman who spoke to the ABC, is in a building that isn't restricted, but he is ordered to isolate at home for 7 days.
I've been ordered again to quarantine at home for a week. Can you believe it? This is maybe the 4th or 5th time I've had to quarantine. They rang to tell me a confirmed case had been found in a place I'd visited. It's so frustrating.
The overall number of cases in Beijing is tiny, but for the best part of 3 years, China's whole approach to the virus has relied on throwing everything at tiny outbreaks. For many, including Michael Huang, fear of being locked down has long surpassed fear of the actual virus.
Life here is really depressing at the moment. There's nothing we can do. Everyone has to do tests every day, and no one dares to leave Beijing in case it changes the status of your health code. The city streets in the evening are really quiet. Shops closed, restaurants closed. It's no good.
Beijing is one of many cities across China struggling to maintain the government's zero-case goal. Chongqing in the southwest and Guangzhou in the south are each recording a few thousand cases a day. Millions of people in both cities are under what's called silent management, a euphemism for lockdowns. In recent days, the country's leader Xi Jinping has finally shone some light at the end of the tunnel. His government announced a small but significant relaxation of the rules. Hotel quarantine for those arriving in China will be cut to 5 days, with 3 days of home monitoring. Local officials are being told to be more precise and less heavy-handed in how they respond. A Health Commission director, Lei Haichao, says it doesn't mean China is giving up on its suppression strategy.
The new guidelines are not relaxing our control efforts, and it's certainly not opening up. It's about adjusting to the latest COVID strains. It's about protecting people's lives, safety and health to the greatest extent while minimising the impact on economic and social development.
The changes come as China's economy looks set to well and truly miss its 5% growth target this year. But the changes only go so far. China's still officially pursuing a zero-COVID policy, just one that's more efficient, according to the government.
King Charles has led the Remembrance Sunday commemorations in London for the first time as monarch. The annual ceremony honours servicemen and women who died in past conflicts. Here's the BBC's Johnny Diamond.
Under grey skies, the grey stone of the great departments of state. At their base, a ceremony to remember those who gave life and limb for their country. All morning, men and women had streamed into central London. Veterans with shoes shining, medals gleaming, backs straight. They came for a ceremony championed by the late Queen, a ceremony she attended into her 90s. Much was the same as in decades past. As the time drew close to 11, all eyes turned towards the cenotaph, the simple block of stone in the centre of Whitehall, inscribed with just 3 words, "The Glorious Dead." With bell and cannon, 2 minutes silence began. As the last post ended, the King stepped forward, a wreath of blazing red poppies in his hand. That he laid at the foot of the cenotaph, withdrew and gave a long salute. More wreaths followed, from royalty, from the Prime Minister and members of the opposition, from military leaders and high commissioners and ambassadors. And then the March of the Veterans began. Many long journeys had been made to be here today, and they were rewarded by the applause and appreciation of the crowd that lined Whitehall 10 deep in places, as those that served their country were given remembrance and respect.
Some more of your thoughts before we head off on third-year nursing students and whether they should be paid for their placements. This listener says Dr. Reti failed to mention the cost of accommodation and travel is covered by the university for medical students. Nursing students need to find and fund their own travel and accommodation while continuing to pay for their rent in their existing flats. Another listener says it's not just about nurses. I'm an occupational therapist. When I was training, we had 8-week placements and could be sent all over the country. I'd have to pay double rent to keep my flat in Dunedin and then wherever I was sent, as well as flights to and from Dunedin. On the subject of dental care, Dunedin is mentioned again. How fortunate we are in Dunedin, this person says. We can go to the dental school. I had a toothache over the weekend. I rang the school this morning and met the criteria to get seen today. All is well now, as is my bank balance. On the second crossing over the harbour, second bridge should be for rail, bus, walking and cycling. And this ambitious person says, how about a bridge over Cook Strait just for bikes? The late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. Tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up looks at the repair cafes breathing new life into old or damaged items and saving them from the landfill and the front berm, it seems. Do tune in, 5 a.m. tomorrow, First Up.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Police don't yet have a suspect for an attack in Christchurch's Bexley Park this morning. They want to hear from drivers who noticed anything suspicious on Pages Road between 4:30 and 6 this morning. A public health dentist says the current dental system puts barriers in front of those in need. And Wellington Water says it's getting reports of a change in water taste and odour across Wellington City. It says the organic compounds causing the change in taste and smell are harmless. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pacific Waves, delving deeper into the major Pacific stories of the week in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the region and the world. I bring you interviews with Pacific newsmakers, experts and commentators in their fields, as well as up-to-date coverage from our talented team here at RNZ Pacific and our correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves, 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
Time now for the detail. There are 37 native plant species on the nationally critical list. Can a seed bank help save them from extinction?
Kia ora, I'm Emile Donovan, and today on The Detail...
Я не знаю, озимі культури були висіяні, от ярі культури, тут от я розкопував.
Earlier this year, a research facility attached to the National Gene Bank of Plants of Ukraine was bombed.
Маркувалося, підписувалося.
This is the 10th largest seed bank in the world. It contains seeds that could eventually blossom into hundreds of variations of wheat and flowers and grasses, tens of thousands of plants of all shapes and sizes. Its function is like all seed banks. It's a backstop in the event of some terrible catastrophe. It's a workshop where scientists crossbreed different strains and species to develop hardier, more resistant plants. And it's a safeguard in case a particular species of plant is wiped out and needs to be brought back from the dead.
Everything you're going to need for the world to survive in terms of agriculture is safely kept here for the future.
Behind the door, there are nearly 1 million different varieties of seeds from all over the world.
The Noah's Ark of plant diversity.
But here in Aotearoa, despite having dozens of native species on the precipice of extinction, there's no one seed bank that holds all our taonga or knows how to keep them all safe. So today on the podcast, Te Tira Whakamātaki Māori biosecurity researcher and policy advisor Marcus Rongowhitiao Shadbolt on what seed banks are, why they're important, and what Aotearoa needs to do to improve in this space.
So a seed bank is a facility that is devoted to storing plant seeds effectively, and through history and the rise of continued and intensified agriculture practices, they've become bigger and more complex around the world.
The work takes place deep underground in a labyrinth of sealed vaults that are encased in steel and concrete.
Different seeds are stored in different ways. The sort of stock standard method that historically has been used and we can apply to most of our seeds is to dry them out and then put them somewhere cold to stay for a while. And when we dry them out and put them somewhere cold, they're very happy to just stay dormant as they are for however long that particular species will stay dormant for. And then when it comes time to plant them, we can take them out of that facility and plant them wherever we need them.
Is it kind of like a library of seeds?
Yeah, it's definitely like a library of seeds. The sort of stock standard seed bank's purpose is to store a collection. So that's what botanic gardens are really good for and have done for a very long time, is they'll collect, for better or worse, all the different seeds they can find and store them in a library or a collection of sorts. That's what the biggest seed bank in the world, Kew Gardens, aims to do.
Its ultimate goal is to ensure the survival of every remaining species of plant on Earth.
Are all seeds created equally when it comes to preserving them, or are some seeds trickier than others?
So they're absolutely not created equal, and that's the challenging part for seed banking. So the only bit of jargon that I'll burden you with today is we have our simple storage seeds. So those are the ones that you can dry out, put them in a jar, put them in a bag, put them in a cold room, and they'll be fine for a number of years. And those ones we call orthodox. And so they are the very simple seeds that are perfectly happy to be dried out and stored for a while. Then we have what we call recalcitrant seeds. And recalcitrant seeds are seeds that if you tried to do that to them, they would die. And so those are seeds like, an avocado. If you think of an avocado or a tomato or something like that, it would be very difficult to imagine that seed without the huge fleshy fruit part around it. And if you tried to dry that out, it would very quickly die and you wouldn't be able to plant it again. So those are our recalcitrant seeds. They're our seeds that you need almost an entire study dedicated to each one just to figure out how to store it.
Wow.
And they can require all sorts of things. Cryopreservation has proven quite useful for those. So that's effectively just snap freezing it with all the moisture inside of it still and then thawing it out at a later date. It's not quite as successful as our orthodox seeds are, but it has proven to work in many seeds. But yes, we have many that we don't know how to store.
I think kauri is a recalcitrant seed, isn't it? And that's something that has been trialled in what did you say it was called? Cryopreservation. Yeah, that's been trialled with kauri seeds, isn't it? And it's been moderately successful. Am I right in saying that?
So the last I heard about the kauri project was that someone figured out how to store them and they could do it, but they only lasted for something like 13 or 16 days in storage. So after that time you would have to plant the seeds or risk them going off, basically.
Kauri is an interesting example here in that most of the kauri forests that we have here in Aotearoa now are regenerated forests, and we were on the precipice of losing kauri as a tree for some time.
For
well over a century, timber was the new colony's main source of trade, when the plunder of the great forests was necessary for economic survival. In fact, in the 1950s, many believed the kauri as a species was doomed.
Yeah, absolutely. Comparing Kauri to its original spread and the way that it once was, it's in a very dire position at the moment. We don't have very much original Kauri forest left. I know some kaumātua who know where some ancient Kauri forest is left, but I can guarantee they're not going to be telling anyone anytime soon. Our great walks have some of our ancient Kauri forest left on there. Our great trees like Tāne Mahuta, the biggest Kauri in the country. That's an ancient tree. But there are journal entries from early European settlers here who were part of the initial Kauri deforestation programs, who recorded in their journals that some trees they cut down were so big that the stumps were large enough to fit a grand piano and multiple dancing couples on them to celebrate after a successful forestry expedition. So the trees we have now are nowhere near as incredible as the ones we used to have.
You were talking about the purpose of seed banks before. I'm curious to get into this. So, like, the way that you described it before is kind of, you know, like a library, sort of like a documentation, I suppose, of the different plants that grow on this beautiful planet of ours and, you know, what they look like and so on and so forth. Is there a sort of a practical element to seed banks as well, though?
Yeah, so the seed banks really have what I see as 4 key purposes. The first of them is simply to conserve plant diversity, as we've mentioned. That is just to catalogue and make sure we have backups of seeds saved away somewhere, just in case we need them. They also are really useful for breeding new varieties. So when crop growers